saying it. This is the same as taking a kid, throwing him into a candy store with a basket of vegetables and say, eat healthy.
All right, we're here with one of our next guests here. You'll see him at a lot of political events in Indiana, either sporting bright socks or a bow tie or suspenders. We have Dr. Dan Stock. Thank you for being here at this event today with Jamie and speaking about education and what it means to be a part of government as we see it today. You are also the director of the CCLA. Can you go in to tell us a little bit about the CCLA and how it functions and what it's planned to do?
Sure. The Citizen Coalition for Legislature Accountability is a group of groups who decided that the problem we have why our legislatures is not serving the constituency is because they have concentrated power given by the rules of the chamber to a single person in each chamber who can then control everything about the debates and voting on the bills that come through that legislature. And effectively, if you think of the way a legislature is supposed to work, is we elect a senator or representative who's supposed to go in and debate with all the other senators and representatives to come up with laws that serve the majority average opinion of the entire state of Indiana.
To better our state.
To better it for the majority view of what better is. And instead, right now, what happens is our senator and representative take the power that we give them, walk into the chamber, and give it away for free to the chamber leader, who unfortunately then becomes the target for every lobbyist and campaign cash-wielding tyrant in the world to take over control of our legislators. So at the CCLA, what this group of groups is there to do is to support our legislators to take back their power that they are now giving away to the leader of the chamber, both for our sake and for the sake of that leader of the chamber, so he's no longer forced to be the target of all the malign influence that can come his way. So this legislature can actually get to the point where it's more responsive to its constituents than it is to lobbyists. And to apologize for our legislators for the fact that we have so long abandoned this that it's sitting there in now.
They've been thrown to the wolves. I mean, after traveling around the state for 2 years and talking to so many reps, and the stories I have of people getting cornered in their office, yelled at, threatened, we're going to primary you, like we saw with John Jacobs. It's just ludicrous. And that's kind of from one, it's all the same side.
In fact, I always hate it when I hear somebody saying, well, I think legislators are terrible people, real greedy, and all this, and I tell them, I think you actually don't know them. When you talk with it, you find primarily they're scared.
Yep.
And I think what they're scared about is that you guys don't have their back. You know, and they've got reason to be scared about that right now. So you need to get your act in gear and start being a worthy constituency, and therefore you can be worthy of the legislator who then will actually change the system to work for you.
Yes, and that's the biggest thing. And when I got brought into a high school to speak in a government class, and the kids got a little bored of me explaining local government, but I had to tell them what I learned from you a long time ago, which was how the State House, directs business. You would think that every name goes into a hat and we tally up the votes. We're talking about a state with a $22 billion budget, almost 7 million people, and we're not doing that. Would you like to tell them how votes are coordinated downtown in our senates?
Yeah, so both in the Senate and the House, the Speaker of the House and the President pro tem in his chamber chooses a committee chairman who serves at his will. And so a bill can be submitted to a hearing, and if it never gets a hearing, the bill dies. So in order to get campaign cash, when legislators file a bill, many times they want to look good to their constituents, and they may even sincerely believe this bill would be a good bill for them. But they realize the lobbyist is really opposed to this bill. And so they file it knowing or hoping that the leader of the chamber will actually tell the committee chairman to never give the bill a hearing, so that it never has to be voted on, and no legislator can be held accountable for siding with the lobbyist over his constituency. And so one of the changes we want is to make it, first of all, so that the committee chairman is chosen by the committee, doesn't serve at the pleasure of the leader of the chamber. That makes it so that he can't be threatened by this one guy who the lobbyist can then attack and persuade and say, hey, if you're going to have our cash, you have to give us this. And secondly, we want to make a change for something that's called a discharge petition. And the discharge petition is something you file with your bill And if it's ever signed by 40% of the chamber or 40% of the committee chairman then has his power removed and he must give that bill a hearing. And that does several things. First of all, it makes it so that, hey, you don't have one guy who can be the target of a lobbyist to kill a bill. It also makes it so that every constituent can see how his legislator felt about every bill that was filed in the legislature, because if his name isn't on the discharge petition, he didn't really support it. And we know that there are even a few unscrupulous legislators who really don't support a bill getting passed, but they need to have something to campaign on at the next election.
Of course you do.
So they file a bill and they actually are requesting that their bill never get a hearing so that they can then come back and say, I filed a bill, but never say the codicil that goes along with it, that I voted for the rules to make sure you would never be able to find out I was insincere in filing that bill.
Because why would they?
Right.
So you're around a lot of state reps all the time. What percentage of them do you think are running the show? What percentage of them do you think are scared?
Well, I'd say, first of all, they're all scared, including the Speaker of the House. But I can tell you that there is probably in the House 5 maybe, but those 5 are scared. Their job is to get campaign cash. So they're not able to sit down and think, what do my constituents want? What's good for the state of Indiana? In the Senate, it's probably fewer than that. But I would tell somebody, if you're asking how many of them are scared, the answer is, well, they're all scared. They're in a system where they know they look hopeless. Their power has been taken away, or more accurately, given away. If they were to stand up and say, well, hey, I'm not going to support this system anymore, campaign cash will vanish. They will have a primary challenger who will try and get them out. And it's very easy for them to get suckered into this talisman of, well, if you want to get anything done, you have to support the system.
Yeah.
Without realizing that you'll get nothing done because the system exists.
You gotta feed the machine.
Yeah.
The machine always wins.
And the machine is not in the control of the constituency. And I don't want anybody to think of this that, gee, this means legislators are weak people. As a matter of fact, I tell people, if you design a system that can only work right when it's filled with Supermen, then it still won't work right because the average American is not a Superman.
Yes.
And so we need the average person to be able to go into a legislature that has rules that works well for that legislature so that it can represent the constituency without financial influence. And that's going to start with changing the rules of the chambers.
So that leads me to my next question. Your website is ccla.
No, it's fixmylegislature.com.
Fixmylegislature.com. On there, if I'm not mistaken, you have a list of candidates that are in support of your guys' transparency movement of the legislation process.
We actually rate candidates by supporting, opposing, not responding, or we have a new category because we have a government
Made today.
Yeah, we have a new candidate who actually said he would not respond until after the election.
Man, I guess we'll just have to bite our teeth until we figure out who that was.
Well, in that race, it's the gubernatorial race, we already have a candidate who has endorsed these rules changes.
Yes.
Is willing to use the bully pulpit of the governor's office to do that. Mr. Rainwater has already decided to support it.
Yeah. So with the CCLA and you being in this for a long time, what's something that can be done to fix what has been?
I think what's most important is that legislators know that their constituents know how the game is played. This game exists because of naivete of the population, and the legislators believe that the people are naive, and therefore they can hide using the rules. But if they started to get emails and phone calls and texts from their constituents saying, I'm your constituent, and I know you can change the rules of the chamber, and these rules are not serving me right now, and I want those rules changed. What will go on in the mind of legislators is oh dear God, that won't work anymore. They know that I have the power to change this system, and they have my back if I do. And a lot of people like to approach legislators with either the carrot or the stick.
No.
And I tell them no human being responds as well to the carrot or the stick as they do to the carrot and the stick. So I encourage you to lead with your legislators with the carrot, saying, look, we really want to support you in this change of our legislature that makes it so that it can serve its constituents. But if you're not willing to do that, then comes the stick. we will find another candidate who will support the Citizens Coalition
Yeah.
and the legislature reforms that we're spearheading. And we will have to support him over you. And it may be that all the campaign cash that you get won't protect you in that situation.
Not at all, and that's what we call primary. I know a lot of candidates who've been primary before for that exact reason, or the exact opposite of them saying, "Hey, I'm not going to feed the machine." Well, the machine's just going to spit you right out.
Right.
But like you said, there's ways that we can move forward in fixing this. And I encourage everyone to go on the Secretary of State's website, type in your address, look at who's your representation from president all the way down to school board. You should know everyone that has your name in their office, and his job is to serve you. So find out who those people are. With this upcoming election, what are the key factors for you and you're looking for, or tipping points in this upcoming November election?
Depending on the race we're talking about, it's first of all the ability to recognize reality. I would say most what I would say about people who we call leftists or people who want big government is they ignore the reality that big government has failed every place it has ever been tried.
Really?
Yes, concentrated power has never worked out well. As a matter of fact, I would give people the story of Argentina, where Mr. Milei wins his election, and at the time he wins, there's more than high double-digit inflation. And what he does immediately is start dissolving government entities. And he says, turn off the printing presses. And they said, well, how are you going to make this government fund? And he said, we're not going to fund it. We're just going to tear it down. And instantly, the quality of living starts to go up. The inflation goes to zero.
Interesting how that works.
Yeah. So the old saying that the government that governs best governs least. So when I see somebody proposing a new government program, not a reform of an existing one, but a new one, like price controls on food or expanding public health. When I see these kind of things, I recognize someone who is psychotic, that they are ignoring the reality that history has taught us over again.
Yep.
I could bore everybody with the biochemistry of how ignorance works in the brain, and they're ignoring that reality too, that human beings just don't do well when we're ignorant.
No.
And I rate candidates by that. So, for instance, when I look at the lieutenant governor candidate race,
Yes.
we have a lieutenant governor who's come out and said, look, the Citizens Coalition for Legislature Accountability is right. Those rules need to become the rule of the Senate of Indiana. Well, this is a very easy choice to make. The only lieutenant governor candidate who's actually back with, this is easy.
Go Beckwith.
Yeah.
That's it.
When I see someone like Kamala Harris, or let me give you an even worse example, Governor Walz, who says the government should decide what reality is. And that we should be able to stem the speech of people who don't agree with the government's view of reality. And I tell, here's a man who has clearly been able to ignore the fact that this is exactly what Lenin and Stalin, Mao Zedong, Xi Jinping, Adolf Hitler. I can go down the line of people who this was the first thing they did is take care of this.
Yeah, and it goes back, if you've ever seen the Matt Walsh documentary or mockumentary of What is a Woman, right? When they go in and they're talking about how in today's world, it's not right and wrong. It's, well, you have your truth, and I have my truth. But that's ludicrous. I mean, we need to come back to the fundamentals of the same truth that says me and you are in the same room right now talking. And when you're introducing, you're fine, Dr. Sock, because you want to be, a unicorn. That's how you're going to identify. And I have to agree with you about that. And that's part of that insanity that we're dealing with now. Do you think that there's an opportunity for that to get better in our society? And if so, how do we do that?
Well, a lot of people get despondent, but I tell people you have to look, and governments are being better century by century. We used to believe the biggest guy who could wield the biggest club was going to be our leader. Then we at least said, well, God's going to be in charge, but he's going to pick us a king. We don't do kings anymore either. Now we have legislature. True, they're tyrannical in most of them. But we have been getting better, and the game of tyranny is not working as well as it used to. I will give you the best example. Japan got nearly all of its population to take an mRNA-based vaccine. Recently, they just came out with a new self-replicating mRNA vaccine. They can get no one in Japan to take it. The company that owns it is going bankrupt, from what I understand.
I thought vaccines were good for you. Is that what?
Well, they're certainly one of the worst studied areas of medicine. the best study being the mRNA shots, where everything looks quite bad.
No way.
But think about this. Just 3 years ago, they were able to sell this game to the population of Japan. Now they cannot get anyone in Japan to buy the game. So the propaganda ploy is not working the way they thought it was. So I am hopeful that our people are learning that as a species, the human race is learning that giving my power to people is not in my best interest unless I can take my power back, and that the more power I give to a human being, the more I corrupt them.
Yeah.
And, giving someone like Governor Walz the power that he had is part of what made Governor Walz make some of the statements he's made.
Yeah.
And realizing that it is an act of compassion to tell someone, we are not giving you that power. But this doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you don't want anything done. It's that you realize the wisdom of the crowd is greater than the wisdom of the wise.
Yeah. I agree. And I don't want them to forget, you are a legitimate doctor. You're still practicing, right?
Yes.
When you hear things that in 2020 that were going around with the vaccine process and the mandates and everything, I know it's been 4 years now, almost, since that all started. Can you walk us through some of your thought process of what was going in Dr. Stock's mind when all that was happening?
So I think to understand, you also have to understand that I sat on the board. I was back when doctors were allowed to represent their other doctors to serve on a hospital physician board. I was elected by my peers to sit on that board. Mm-hmm. And so I got to see how the federal government, the financial control it has over the entire healthcare network, everything from the hospital CEO to the pharmaceutical industry that pays it to participate in a pay-to-play scheme, and all of that. And so what went through my mind when I saw in early 2020 them talking about this disastrous respiratory virus, I already knew that if you got people's vitamin D levels up in the 55 range and made sure that they had sufficient zinc, that there was virtually no way they would die from one of these viruses, that there was much ado being made about nothing. And when I saw in March of 2020 we're going to shut it down for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, what went through my mind is, this is where it breaks.
Yeah.
Because I knew this was happening. The power had become so concentrated financially. So few people had so much control over how the money moved that there was no way this would not happen eventually. And I just realized, COVID is the thing they're going to do this with. This is where the ignorance takes over and runs like it did in Nazi Germany.
And I think it proved that the government I think the government did that as a ploy to figure out how far can we go. And I think it was successful for them. They figured out they can push all this, and you know what? Likely half the population is gonna do whatever we say. And I still see people wearing masks in cars.
Yeah, but I think they also got comeuppance on this. Remember that while they were able to get a lot of the population, 2/3 of the population, to take at least one shot at this, they've not been able to get more than 20% to take a third shot.
Yeah, those boosters, right?
The boosters have been very poorly adopted. I think it's still less than 10% of children have been given a shot. Most parents wouldn't do it, despite the financial threats and the school boards that went nuts. And even Los Angeles, they were threatened to throw your kid out of school if you didn't take a COVID shot.
Yeah.
Vaccine hesitancy has now gotten to a height that it has ever been in the country, as more people have become aware that the scientific method used to validate this was really propaganda, not scientific method. And people have realized, you know what? I think this healthcare system is not in my best interest. And I
Don't say.
And this gives me much hope, seeing that the people of the United States and other countries as well have realized that no, this was never science, this was all propaganda, and I must distrust the people who use that propaganda, which was my government.
Yeah.
And that gives me great hope.
Do you think if they were wanting to create a bigger and deeper political divide in this country, do you think they were successful with COVID?
I think they had short-term success that then has led to great long-term harm to their cause. Tyrants really shot themselves in the foot with this. But then tyrants do that. They are, by their definition, ignorant. They're sure they can keep people stupid forever. And I think they always believed that human beings would stop learning at command. and don't realize that the brain and the ability to learn is what distinguishes our species from most other species.
Yeah.
And I think that they're honestly on the back foot right now. Let's face it, you can call Argentina a banana republic, but that banana republic figured it out.
Yeah, they did. If you don't know what that all is, everyone needs to go research what happened down there.
Yeah.
Because it's ludicrous. Ludicrous.
Yeah, Alternative for Germany is gaining in the polls in Germany. The same is happening in France. I think those people who would, in their ignorance, be tyrants have instead taught the lesson that tyranny is not tolerant.
Yeah. I mean, all we need to do is look at history.
And the species is learning faster.
That's,
Let's face it, in World War II, we had to blow up many buildings and kill many people to overcome the idea of tyranny. There's going to be a lot less buildings burned because of the COVID scheme. Maybe as many people will die, but there will be a lot less buildings burned. So the species is getting better at this.
I really hope so. Here's how I look at it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Republican, head of ed. What are our scores like in Indiana?
They suck.
They suck. They're not good.
We're like down with the southern states.
Yeah, which is real low.
Very low.
Very low.
We're the lowest in the Midwest.
Which is impressive.
Right.
That we're that bad.
Yeah.
And now this woman who has said, has gotten a budget of over $1 billion every year, right? $2 billion for the fiscal year. $1 billion to run Indiana's Department of Ed. Train wrecked it. Now says it's not my fault. I did everything I could. We hired as many DEI people as we possibly could spend $1 billion on. And now it should be your governor.
Everything about her discussions when she was yelling about, well, that's horrible because they won't let us do Common Core. I was like, well, okay. First of all, I don't really think that we need a nationwide educational standard. The states working independently will all come to almost all the same conclusions.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think we need this national thing. The states can look at it and say, okay, this group came together and made Common Core. We'll take it and modify it the way we want. But when I see some of the things in Common Core, we need to begin child sexual education in 8-year-olds. It's like, wait a minute. This is the equivalent of taking a child, putting them in a candy store, and telling them to eat healthy. They don't have the background to understand this won't work.
No.
You can say that you threw a basket of vegetables in the corner, but the child not having any more preparation for this exposure to the idea of an orgasm, which is one of the most addictive things in the human body, and you think they're going to come out with a healthy way to understand this and not destroy themselves
At the age of 6 or 9
6
or
or
10,
8 or 10,
whatever they choose.
right. The problem is controlling impulsivity. Controlling addiction is very difficult. Learning your impulse control is something your parents teach you, but we all learn it differently. Some are more guilt-based, some are more shame-based, some are thought-based, some have mixtures of all of this. You show me how anybody who's a teacher or in a government, even worse, can understand this kid and know how their impulse control mechanisms work well enough to present this subject and know when they're ready, they've got good enough impulse control that they can handle this subject. Impulse control is so difficult to even test and see if you've got it. No one has an idea except the parent.
No.
And you want to make this some of the criteria that we're going to teach every 8-year-old who probably, even if they had great parents, doesn't have the impulse control to handle this?
No, well, they don't have the impulse control to control their kid, right?
Right.
Look,
You're insane. This is the same as taking a kid, throwing them into a candy store with a basket of vegetables and say, eat healthy.
Yeah.
I can guarantee you they're going to be face down in chocolate and dead from diabetes. I would want to go to them and say, if you think you have to do that experiment, you are insane. All right? Nothing about your experience of reality tells you that is likely going to go the way you want it to. It's like saying we have to do a study on whether or not taking hammers and smashing them in the forehead will treat headaches. So we're going to get 100 people and smack 50
I think that's what they sent all the gender studies people to go do.
It's the kind of thing I don't want to spend anybody. any of my tax dollars on the study to see if hitting people in the head with hammers will solve headaches.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Because I always tell people I'm politically active and I try to push as much as I can online and speak at events because I want my generation to get more involved. Because once you guys are gone, I'm in a real tough spot. I don't have a lot of players on my side. And, I'm 21. In 30 years, everyone from my generation is going to be running everything. What would you say to my generation? If you had 200, 1,000, 20,000 of them listening to you, what's the most important thing to tell them?
Well, think independently and question everything. Your generation has been set upon because your education was much worse than mine was. And they started making it worse at younger ages than mine was. But I would tell everybody in your generation, look, you don't need someone to think for you. Go do your own reading. Remember that if something is being suppressed, it's probably true.
It's worth reading.
Right? The ultimate way to do tyranny is to avoid debate, not have it. And then get in that debate, stay calm in that debate. And I believe that if you do that, you'll figure it out. There is a tendency to believe in the wisdom of age, and I tell somebody there is a greater ability to believe in the wisdom of calm debate. And if your generation does that, you will have achieved what my generation has lost. But all of these generations are getting closer to.